Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Mommin'. I'm Megan.
I'm Jessica.
And we are a little, I don't know, excited and tired and laughing right now.
I feel like no one can see Megan right now, but I feel like she might be a little slap happy.
Yeah, I think I am. I'm tired this week. I mean,
I,
every week.
yeah, I hear you. She's also rocking her pajamas and a blanket, which
No
I
one knows what
approve
time
of.
it is.
Oh, yeah, it's 5 o'clock. It's fine. To be clear, I totally approve of it. It was just funny to see you appear on the screen that way.
Yes, I
I
told
can,
Jesse that. Oh, go ahead. Oh, I just said that now if I shower at some point that's like past, I think 4 is probably my threshold. Because before 4, I think I'd put on like regular or workout clothes. But after 4, if I don't have an interview for this, if no one's going to see me, I'm in my pajamas. It's winter.
I don't judge it. I used to get home from work every day and change into my pajamas.
Actually, I
Yeah.
did too, especially in healthcare or workout
Yeah.
clothes. Yeah. I
Yeah.
never kept my work clothes on.
No. Well, and also if I rode, I rode the metro, so like anything that
Yeah.
touched it, I was like, I'm not keeping that on. But
It's funny. I never changed after the metro ever.
I always did. That is why I felt like I was uniquely positioned to be okay with the germ side of the pandemic because I was like, oh yeah, this is stuff I already do. Not to this level, but
Really? Like,
mhm.
what part? The wiping of the groceries?
No, I never did that. But like people in my office, like the first week that it started, were like, oh, we have to use paper towels to open the door handles and we have to wash our hands after we touch the door handles. And I was like, you aren't doing that already?
Yeah, I feel like I always did that because that's what our grandparents taught us.
Mm-hmm.
But I had also become very chill about my kids getting dirty or like eating things because you just kind of have to. And so I remember we were at the library like the week before I was, it was kind of at the end of that week that I was like, okay, I like started changing in the car after work and everything at the end of that week. So that would have been a Tuesday, and the kids were like putting things in their mouths, or Tori was, and I was like, "Ooh, like this is really bugging me now." Didn't you? I mean, you can't control your kids.
No. No, I think it was more me. Like, if Nora
Oh,
was going to
yeah.
grab something, I would try to avoid it if we were in a public place. But no, it was just more me focused. Like, okay, well, these pants have touched the metro seat, so they are not going to touch my bedspread.
Well, that makes
Yeah.
sense. I bet I didn't do that though. I bet I sat at the edge of my bed after sitting on the metro.
Which is fine. It's just I'm a bit. I mean, I remember like yes, our to be clear, not our parents. It was our grandparents. Like we were not
Yes.
allowed to touch handrails on escalators.
Yes.
We were not allowed to touch buttons. I remember one time I was brushing my teeth and I was putting the toothpaste on the toothbrush and I set it down on the sink and it just flipped to the side. And I went and I rinsed it off and then I was going to use it. And Grandpa came in and he ripped it out of my mouth and threw it away. He said, "You can't use that anymore." Like,
Oh, he
oh,
would really be horrified by the toothbrush I let Tori use because she sometimes puts that everywhere. I mean,
yeah.
not
And
everywhere.
it's fine. But yeah, that's the kind of level of germophobia we were
Yeah.
dealing with. So
Which some of the things are great skills, but sometimes people probably think I'm crazy.
yeah, a little of both. And that's fine.
This is reminding me of when we went to Contagion, the movie, in
Oh
movie
my
theaters.
gosh. That was horrifying.
Do you want to tell a story?
Oh my gosh. Megan and her husband Patrick and I went to go see Contagion, which I think has actually come back to be popular in the current times.
Probably. I think of it
Yeah.
sometimes.
So we were in the movie theater and this man came in. He came in late and he was holding, oh gosh, what was it? Was it tater tots?
No, it was
It
nachos.
was not. Oh
I'm
god.
I'm pretty positive it was
It
nachos, like
was
almost
yeah.
100%.
It was nachos, and he was walking in and tripped and fell, and his nachos went all over the floor of the movie theater, and he picked them back up and put them in his container and ate them in the movie Contagion.
And it was like 15 minutes in. Did you say that? Like it was super late and he was like obviously late and I felt awful for him that he fell. And then he literally was like, I paid good. Like he like
He
said
said
the
it.
amount.
Yeah.
And I can't remember what it was. And of course, movie theater snacks are expensive, but I bet the
Mhm.
theater would have given him a new one.
Uh,
I
he
feel
should have
like they
just
would
asked.
have.
Yep. I mean, it
Yes.
was the height of irony. Like,
Oh my
and
gosh.
it was so gross. But yeah, I mean, you feel bad for him. But they would have given
Yeah.
him free ones.
And was that in Chinatown or Silver Spring? Was
Chinatown.
it
We never
China?
saw a movie in
And
Silver Spring together.
oh, we didn't?
Mm-mm.
Oh, we sometimes went there if like maybe just for Star Wars or Harry Potter or something. I don't remember.
No,
But
it was definitely Chinatown, and it was
which
horrifying.
most people took the metro there then. So then
Yeah.
it's just
Oh
like
gosh.
it's so gross.
But it was
Oh my
so
goodness.
funny. I mean, for us, not for him, but
Yeah.
so
I mean, I
funny.
did feel bad for him. I feel like other weird things happened during that movie, but that
There
was
was
the best.
something else that happened that I can't remember what it was because I remember it was a really maybe there was a kid in there. I don't remember,
I
but
think there was like a kid dancing in the front of the theater, like in front of the screen. And it was late, and we were like, "Why is this kid here dancing?" Like bidding
yeah, it was a
parents to
young
let
kid.
them go up.
It was a weird movie. I just remember that. It was
Yeah.
also weird because people who don't know Megan, she doesn't really like movies. I personally find it to be your biggest character flaw. But
I do like movies.
but you really don't.
No, I just have to be, like, in the right I feel like I used to go to more movies. I think the thing is now well, first of all, I can't go to a theater now, but even when I could, like, there's a lot of things I wanna do when I have a babysitter, and movies just out not top of my game,
But this was
my
pre-baby.
list.
I don't think it's ever been, which is fine. It's fine.
I feel like I like going to movies. I probably suggested going when we
Mm,
were younger.
okay.
But yeah, I mean, now, well, and I never have really enjoyed well, I used to. I don't know. I don't really enjoy watching a movie at home anymore. I would much rather binge a show because it feels like kind of less of a commitment
Right,
each
like
time.
5 episodes of an hour-long TV show versus a 90-minute movie. But I see what you're
Yeah, like
saying.
I could
Like,
stop. I
yeah.
could stop.
No,
Yeah,
it's true.
I mean, I probably don't watch 5 episodes of an hour show in
No,
a row.
exactly. I mean,
That would be
to be
impressive.
fair, I don't watch as many movies now, but it
Yeah.
was funny because I love movies. I could go see a movie a day if I was able to, but I'm not. But yes.
Yeah. You're right. I mean, yes, I've never loved them the way that you do.
No, that's okay. We all have our
Yeah,
strengths.
Patrick doesn't like it either. What does he say my things are? That I don't remember. Something
Wait, he
else is a
doesn't
big
like that you
flaw.
don't like movies? Yeah,
Yeah,
no, I'm with
yeah.
him.
And like that I fall asleep. Like for it's really weird. I fall asleep in a movie right away if we put one on, but I can hang for usually I can hang for
By
shows.
the way, you also fall asleep during plays that we go see.
Listen, I was working night shift. I was working night shift when that happened.
I'm just saying, again, it's just a good memory.
When you work night shift and you rotate, so I was rotating then. So that meant like some weeks I worked day shift and some weeks I worked night shift. I don't think I ever felt awake.
It wasn't the
So
most riveting play either, but
it was not, but it was a very small theater.
yes, it
So
was.
that was really embarrassing.
Quite all right. Everyone
And
survived.
they don't allow food or drink in theaters, which makes sense, but I really needed it to stay awake. So,
They do at that theater, though.
oh well.
I've been there many times.
Oh, they do? I don't remember
Uh-huh.
being able to eat there.
They do. I only know it because we
Hmm.
went there all Sean and I went to plays there a lot, but
Man, you're going to plays and movies all the
well,
time.
we used to, you know.
Yeah,
We
a
used to do a
long
lot of
time
things.
ago. Yeah.
Anyways, we are so excited this week to share our episode with Lindsey Fitzsimons. Lindsey is a fourth year PhD candidate in biomedical science studying the pathogenesis of congenital heart disease. Are you intimidated yet? She is so bubbly and full of life and energetic, and she was so wonderful to talk to. She really helped us understand what a PhD entails because gotta be honest, I didn't know, and I don't think Megan knew exactly what it meant to be pursuing a PhD. And she shared a lot of her personal life with us as well.
Yeah, it was a great conversation, and had such a great time chatting with her.
We hope you enjoy this episode, and thank you so much for listening. Hope everyone's doing well and staying safe. You can find us at momandpodcast.com, Mom and Podcast on Instagram, or check out our Facebook group.
Thanks for listening.
Hi, Lindsey. Thanks so much for joining us today on this episode of Mommin'.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here amongst fellow moms.
Yeah.
Yes.
Nice way for all of us to spend our lunch hour or post-lunch hour.
Do you get an hour for your lunch?
Well,
No.
I'm home with my kids, so I get, a couple minutes here and there between feeding them.
I always fantasize about that. There's got to be people out there somewhere that they really have a full hour for their
Right,
lunch
and
break, and they break.
Yeah. So, Lindsey, if you would like to give us a little background for our guests, a little bit about yourself and your profession and your family, a little overview about you.
Sure. My name is Lindsey Fitzsimons. I am, how old am I now? I'm 32. I am a fifth year PhD student. I'm studying, or I'm getting my PhD in biomedical science, and I study the disease process of congenital heart disease. So babies that are born with holes in their hearts, as they're called. That disease process is on a molecular level what I study. I am a mom to James. He is turned 3 in August. I'm a spouse. My husband, John, he and I live together with James and our dog, Gertie, Black Lab. She's 5. And yeah, I don't know what else. I feel like I'm not very good at summarizing myself.
That's great.
That is great. And where are you all living?
So we live in Portland, Maine. I'm originally from outside of Portland, Maine, but went to college in upstate New York, went to grad school in Pennsylvania, and then started my PhD in California, and got married, and through a series of various traumatic events, ended up back in Maine, but then and finally was living with my husband, and then started my PhD over at the University of Maine, and now we have a house and a child, and yeah, it's great. So I commute like an hour to the University of New England, the College of Osteopathic Medicine in Biddeford, Maine, which is like about 45 minutes south of Portland, closer to New Hampshire.
Wow, that's a commute.
Yes.
I always say it's like literally the only part of my job that I don't like. I don't like.
Right.
Everyone's like, "Oh, just listen to a podcast." I'm like, "Yeah, I know," but a lot of I like a podcast. But I definitely most of the drive I'm thinking like, if I had this 45 minutes sitting on a train, or a bus, I could be writing this or studying that.
Right.
But I can't do those things and drive, so.
The things you could get done. Wow.
I know, right? With the hour-long lunch break.
Right.
Yeah, it is. 2 hours. I mean,
it must be out there somewhere.
Oh, well, one thing we really like to ask people, if you're comfortable sharing, is if you always knew you wanted to have kids, if you and your partner talked about having kids before having them, and what that included, like if you talked about how many or if.
Well, so I am my family is not what anyone would call a traditional family. So my sister and I are from my mom and my dad. My dad's since been married several times. So I've got a full sister, a half brother, 2 stepsisters, and a stepbrother. So
I'm trying to keep track.
So there's always, but I'm definitely not an only child, and I've always been around other. So I was the oldest. I am the oldest. I've always wanted kids, and I think I've been pretty vocal about wanting kids from the start. I mean, definitely when I feel like such an old lady saying this. When I was dating, I definitely I think that would probably be something that I would bring up very early on. Like, yes, I absolutely want to have kids. My husband, John, I mean, that was definitely something that we talked about very early on. And I don't think that I necessarily knew how many kids I wanted to have. I think I sort of knew that it was going to be a lot harder than I ever imagined. So I think it was like TBD.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I always knew I wanted to have more than one because I definitely I had some friends growing up that were only children, and I feel like they really, no judgment to any other parent. But for me as a parent and me growing up with siblings, I just felt like there was a lot more to be gained from that experience, having other children around, not just being the only child. So for me, nobody else, I
Yeah.
wanted to have more than one child. And currently we have one child. When I'm trying to think, we definitely talked about it from the beginning that we wanted children. But as far as trying, I think it might have even been like on our wedding night where I was like, "Oh, you want to make a baby?" And we did not. But I think he like it was like sort of an ongoing joke where I would like almost every time be like, "Oh, want to make a baby?" And he would say no. And eventually it got to the point where let's see, we were living together in Maine. This was after I had started my current PhD program. And it was a good time. His job and income were stable. My income were stable. And I mean, it was literally like, do you want to just make a baby? And sure. Like, and we did. And it literally like this never, I mean, I want to say this never happens, but it did. It was, it really sometimes only takes the one time, just the one, just the one. And it did like just the one time. So I like could pinpoint it exactly. Um, so yeah, we did talk about it. We tried and it worked. And I like just like that was my experience of getting pregnant was like, oh, okay, you just decide to have a baby and then it happens right away. And pregnancy for me sucked. I did not enjoy being pregnant, and I hated every woman that was like, "Oh, it's so beautiful." Like, yes, the baby is beautiful. Having a baby is beautiful. Making a baby is beautiful, but like the day to day of like the farting and the peeing and the swelling and the just I don't want to do it again, but I'm going to. But that's it. I think just one more time.
One more kid and you're done, huh?
I just it's really I just did not enjoy being pregnant. I did not. There were like moments where I did, like the ultrasound, and it's a very cool experience. But I think I don't know. I mean, I when I was growing up, I didn't have an eating disorder, but I definitely had body dysmorphia, and so it took me a really long time to be like somewhat. I don't think any woman is really like entirely comfortable with her body, but I would argue. But for me, like I had sort of just gotten to a place where I felt like I was comfortable with the way that I ate, the way that I exercised, like with the way my body was. And then pregnancy sort of changed all of that, and not necessarily for the worse. It just that I didn't anticipate the sort of emotional back and forth of like developing a new relationship with my body and what it's like to have, someone that you haven't met really like you don't have any choice. Your body is going to prioritize your pregnancy, that fetus, um, every time over your own, emotional and physical well-being. And I think that there were many times where that was hard.
For sure.
I know
Yes.
that sounds so selfish. But
No, no, it's really hard.
someone's gonna come after me on the internet.
No.
No. I mean, I for the women whose pregnancies are easy, that's so wonderful. But if it's not, I mean, mine was really hard too. And I remember thinking to myself more than once, like, this might have been a mistake. This,
Oh yeah.
and you feel
Oh totally.
awful, but if that's what it is for you, you can't change that either.
Yeah. I mean I definitely like for me it always comes back to like, do I want the baby? Yes, absolutely. Like we wanted the baby. We want to have another baby. But it was definitely like just the day to day of pregnant, and 10 months is a long time. And also no one tells you it's 10 months.
I
It's 10
know.
it's 10 months. And if for the most part, the pregnancy goes like 41 weeks for your first time around, assuming you don't need a C-section or don't have a planned C-section, or assuming things go, reasonably within normal boundaries. Like you usually first time moms go over. They don't tell you that. And that's like definitely the point where you're like ready to kill everyone. So I remember that last 2 weeks, there was this point, like I was so swollen and I was so hot. And James was born in August, and in Maine it's like it doesn't get temperature wise that hot, but it gets very humid. And in August it's like gross, like the kind of humid where you get out of the shower and you immediately feel like you need to shower again. And I gained so much weight. And I was just like, one night I just had a meltdown. I like got in the bath, and it was a cold bath just to cool off. And then I got stuck in the bathtub. And I was like, oh my God. Oh my God. Like, just that was the low point. That was the low point. And then there were
Did you
like
have to call
2 weeks.
your husband?
Yeah. Yeah. I was like, talk about mortified. I just was like, this is about as low as it gets.
Oh, that's so funny.
Get the forklift out.
Oh my God.
That, and like,
Wow.
I don't know. I ended up having to be induced. My water broke. I didn't realize that it did. And so I was like in the hospital being induced. And I said to them, I don't like, please don't tell me how much weight I've gained. Like, please just write down what you need to write down that's medically relevant, but don't say that out loud. And sure enough, I like get on the scale, and they might as well have just been like weighing in at 215 pounds. And I was like already in labor at that point. And I think I was just like,
How dare you?
terrible.
I don't blame me when I was in the hospital, I don't think.
No, of all the things to do while you're in labor, why?
Why would it even
Why?
matter at that
It's
point?
like just stick a wrench in there, twist it around a little more. Like, oh my God. I was like, oh.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
No.
Yeah.
It's never a dull moment. I feel like my life is very exciting.
That's a good way to look at
Very
it, right?
eventful.
You're never
Yeah.
bored.
Yeah.
Oh. Well, and if you're comfortable sharing, we had seen that you posted on Instagram that you recently too had a miscarriage. If you're comfortable talking about how you're handling that or what the process has been like both physically and emotionally for you.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely comfortable talking about it. I think I don't know if it's because I sort of work in the medical field or if it's just because I've had a lot of therapy, but I I just feel like I feel comfortable talking about it.
Mhm.
I recently was pregnant with twins, and I lost them at 11 weeks in August. And I found out the day before my son's birthday. So
Oh.
the actual procedure that I had to have was on his birthday, and ironically, it was like they scheduled it like at the exact time that he was born. Like talk about like
Oh,
Oh.
weird.
just like very
Yeah.
weird.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that feels
Um,
weird.
so I didn't know, and I went in for a routine ultrasound, and they couldn't find heartbeats, and it was pretty obvious that something was wrong. And I sort of knew it. Like there were a couple of days where like the nausea just stopped, and I don't know. I feel like when you're pregnant, you have this intuition when something is wrong, like your body just tells you. And I had that, and I like was fighting it, and trying to just because the first time around it was so easy that like I took it for granted completely. Um, and so, yeah, so when I found out, and the way, because of being like, it was a first trimester, it was a miscarriage, but it was at 11 weeks. It was sort of right at that point where I was just about almost into the second trimester. And because of the size of we'll call it tissue, I needed to have a DNC procedure because it was too like medically risky to do the medical version of that procedure. So I did that, and um, it was I don't even think traumatizing covers it. So it's COVID-19. So you can't have anyone with you. And I mean, that sort of a procedure already happens in a very sort of sterile environment, as it should medically, but you know, given the nature and the sensitivity of that sort of a procedure, you would think that there would be some emotional structural support in place that I didn't encounter. It was basically just myself and the doctor, a nurse that came in at one point, but they, I don't know what's standard of care for this, but they gave me lidocaine, but that was it. And apparently, like other places, you get sedated for this sort of a procedure, which I was not. So it was extremely painful. And I was not sedated.
Oh
So
my
it was
gosh.
like physically traumatizing as well as emotionally traumatizing. I remember just like laying there while they were doing it, just thinking like, just sobbing, thinking all I want to do is have someone hold my hand and like there's one person here and she's wearing gloves and she's like inside my body and that's like it. Um,
Oh,
it was really difficult and and it's just like the concept of like how did I like I walked in with babies in my uterus and I left without them and initially the recovery was I had zero bleeding after the procedure. And I just sort of was like, okay, well, now we just sort of move on and try again. And, but then a few days after that, the floodgates opened. And that was the first of like a series of complications where I had to have multiple follow up DNC procedures. My hemorrhaged at one point. I ended up in the ER, and the ER is not where anyone wants to be after a procedure like that. Not to mention, like in COVID times, you don't want to like the last place you want to be is the ER. But because of COVID times, at least in Maine, urgent care facilities are not equipped with ultrasound. So all pregnant women, if it's an emergency, you have to go to the emergency room, which to me sounds sort of counterintuitive. Like you
uh-huh.
wouldn't want your pregnant ladies in the emergency room, but that is the case. So I had to have a couple of emergency surgeries, and I was in the hospital for a while, and it just like, um, so yeah, it was a lot more of a physical recovery with a lot of complications than I ever anticipated. And I think that part made the emotional recovery a lot harder because like physically it was dragged out for so long. And I mean, you think about it, like I was like bleeding, actively bleeding for like over a month. Um, and it's one of those things where it's sort of like after you give birth and you're just like wearing a diaper and like an actual diaper, not just like a pad, like a diaper. And it's one of those low points, where it's just like wearing a diaper and I've been bleeding for weeks. And so you can edit all this out if like,
Oh, no, no, this is
but
real.
yeah, so it's been really tough. And I think finally, once I was able to physically heal, like there's definitely a second wave of like emotional loss, like
Mhm.
both the loss of the pregnancy, but also like that whole clinical experience was very traumatizing. Like
Mhm.
again, you can't, in the ER, you can't have anyone with you. So all this stuff is happening very quickly. And, my husband wasn't allowed to come in. And so it was really tough, emotionally. And, yeah, so I'm glad that's over. Now we're trying to have another baby. And it's been about 3 months and no luck so far. Oh, it's frustrating. But I think my body's just trying to tell me that it's it's been through a trauma and it's just got to recover itself a little bit before it can do that again. Hopefully there will be success in the future.
Yeah. I mean, thank you for sharing that because I'm sure
Yeah.
there's plenty of people who have been through that situation and
Mhm.
it's always helpful to hear from someone else, but really awful what you had to go through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't mean to be so graphic, but I feel like if
No,
you're going to tell the
I
story,
No.
you have to sort of share some of that stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm medical, so nothing bothers me. So
But
I'm
I,
probably
you
not a
know,
good filter.
If you're medical, then you know that I held back a lot.
and I'm not medical, and I think that as a woman, as a mom, especially if that is something that's going to happen to you, you kind of want to know, like you
Yeah.
want the honesty. So I
Mhm.
Well,
appreciate you.
sorry to interrupt. I
No.
just thinking that was my biggest issue with everything. Like I've never had an experience where I really felt like let down by the quality of medical care that I received. Like
Mhm.
I grew up having, my parents are both doctors, and I was very fortunate in the sense that I always had regular, physician appointments. I always had excellent medical care. And this was the first time that I feel like medicine failed me,
Mhm.
and not just academically, but also, I really like there were several times where I questioned like, do they actually have my best interest at heart, or are they just trying to cut me open again? And I think there it oftentimes came back to this idea of like I really don't think no I don't really don't think anyone sat down with me and very clearly communicated like what to expect. Like when you're
Mhm.
pregnant, they do that all the time. And there's several books out there, like what to expect. Week number one, like vomiting. um, but with a miscarriage and or a DNC procedure, like I mean, they give you a sheet of paper, but it really like it's so generic, and I did not find it helpful at all. And let alone like it doesn't cover any of like what can I expect to feel emotionally. Like
Mhm.
it doesn't need to be detailed, but I think it's safe to say that you'll feel sad the day
Mhm.
afterwards and
Hmm.
for a little while. I mean, that I feel like that's the sort of thing that's generic enough that, from a liability perspective, you could still put that on your take home sheet
Mhm.
without getting sued.
No,
But
Absolutely.
totally. That's what when
uh,
you were telling me that, I'm like, it sounds like no one told you, like, this is the procedure.
well, they told me the procedure, but they don't tell you like I guess they're like, well, you might have some bleeding, you might have some cramping, and you're just like, okay, I can handle that. I had a kid, like, I have a
Hmm.
period.
Mhm.
Hmm.
But I think that, and probably the reason why they don't communicate more is because for every woman, it must be so
Mhm.
different.
Mhm.
Right.
And I imagine, like, with every pregnancy or every subsequent loss, God forbid, that it's probably different each time. Um, and so just like childbirth. So I don't want to like necessarily point a finger and accuse anyone, but I
Oh, no.
do think that there's like an enormous room for improvement
Mhm.
on the communication end of things, and
Mhm.
and that includes like the literature. Like, why isn't there a what to expect when you're expecting and your pregnancy failed? Like,
Mhm.
how
Right.
about that? I
Yeah.
mean, it's every 1 in 4 confirmed pregnancies, depending on who you cite, or 1 in 3 pregnancies that ends in miscarriage.
Hmm.
Um, so I would think that would be justified, but
Yes.
you put that out to the universe.
Yeah. You just add it to your plate, you can
Yeah.
Oh yeah, in my spare time, my lunch
yeah.
hour.
You'll
Yeah,
write it
exactly.
on your lunch hour.
I mean, it's needed, absolutely,
It
like you
is.
said, and 1 in 4, that's a lot of people who could definitely
Mhm.
benefit from it.
Mhm.
But yeah, I don't recall ever seeing anything out there like that. Like
No.
No,
how, yeah.
it's not there. I looked for it. Like,
Right.
I would never have pegged myself as being the person that Googles that kind of something, but I was like, sure enough, I was like, what to expect, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
So,
Yeah. And that's when
yeah.
people turn to, like, message boards, which can be helpful, but
Um,
also as
it's a
a
double-edged
medical person
sword.
reading
Yeah.
message boards, sometimes I'm like, "Oh god, this is horrible advice. This isn't even real."
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. It's a slippery slope.
yes, and so it can be great or it can be the exact opposite, and so having, like, an actual valid thing to turn to would be helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I often found myself calling my doctor. Like they had like
Mhm.
every, resource says, well, if you're not sure, call your doctor. So you call your doctor. And like and also because of COVID, everybody like the physicians are stressed. They're strapped
Mhm.
for time. They've got
Mhm.
fewer personnel. Like I was lucky if I got a call back like 3 days later. And, that's part of the reason why, so-and-so passes your case to somebody else, and it's like, okay, well, I'm bleeding out, so I'm going to just go to the emergency room and you guys can figure that out. I'll be over there.
Right.
Oh my word.
So it's, and again, I don't want to point a finger at any one physician. I just think, the circumstances right now, I do think that the quality of medical care that's being provided is absolutely compromised, and it's not any one person's fault. But it's very real.
Right.
Yeah, I can so see that. Wow. Well,
I know. Where do we go from there? I'm not that much of a downer.
Oh, no, not at all.
No, I don't feel that way at all.
No,
the realism.
It's very helpful. Yes, it's important to talk about.
Right.
Yeah. So this is a very light topic now, but let's just talk a little bit about parenting before we jump into your career a bit more. Is there something that's been the most surprising part about being a parent to you?
Surprising. I think the most surprising part is that I can't believe the amount that I've been able to like get done as a parent. Like, I feel like I always imagined that I was going to be this super productive, like super in shape mom that did everything. But then like you actually go through it and you're like, oh my God, the movies aren't real. And but I think I do feel like I've surprised myself in what I've been able to juggle and what I've been able to do, having my job be as demanding as it is, but also great, and also being a mom for the first time. I think I really I don't want to. I think I sort of approached motherhood like, okay, well, I'm just gonna like not freak out about being a mom. I'm just gonna like take everything as it comes and like just try to survive, not thrive. And that's been a pretty good like rule of thumb. Normally, I'm a perfectionist, but motherhood, like, I don't think allows for perfectionism.
No.
It's different for everyone, but for me, it was very helpful to just realize that I was not going to be perfect. So, it's better to just survive and like, that sounds so depressing too.
No,
It's not though,
no,
because
it
then
really resonates.
yeah, and then you're so much happier when you have these big moments like, look what I did, because you never think it's possible. So I think that's just a great approach. Like, have low expectations.
Well, it sounds bad, but like in theory, by doing that, you're setting yourself up for the greatest experiences, like better experiences.
Absolutely.
It's not like that low bar lifestyle.
No, and perfectionism really truly isn't good for any of us.
Well, especially not new moms. I think I mean, you guys know it's so hard. You're just sort of like all of a sudden like handed this thing and you're like, okay, I grew that. And like, now what?
Right. And like you said, the movies aren't real. So you have this idea in your head that you're going to be out walking your baby in like your 2-inch heels in a really put together outfit 2 weeks later. Like, everything's great.
All your baby weight's gone, like,
right. And you're rested and everything. And that's so the opposite of 95% of women's reality, maybe 99. So
probably all.
And I'm sorry, but if there's anyone out there doing that, like, props to you, serious props to you. But my guess would be that there's something else going on underneath the surface that's not
probably very
not going just as perfect the exterior.
No, I can't. I don't know what world that would be.
Blisters. They probably have blisters from those 3-inch heels because they're swelling postpartum.
Probably.
My feet are like.
Put those on.
I think that's a really great answer. I that's so true. Like the things that we do, not only the day to day, but you look back at, whatever age your child is and how much you've done since then. And it's probably good for all of us to do that and sort of take stock of how awesome we all are in that sense.
Yeah, well, because I think, it's very, very easy to get stuck in a place as a parent where you're like, oh my God, I haven't, I need to do this. And especially, being a parent usually happens at a point that coincides with, if you have a career outside of the home, that's usually the most vulnerable point in your career, also, usually. So that's, you're especially, I think, in tune to being productive or whatever. And it's so easy to just think of the time being a parent as not being productive, but that in and of itself is like you're raising a human. That's productive.
Mhm, mhm. Exactly.
Oh, that's a
So
good
true.
reminder. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, switching gears a bit, if we can chat a bit about your professional background and your academic background. You're a scientist. Is that something that you've always wanted to be, or like what sort of led to where you are at now?
No, I have not always been a scientist. My career, my resume is sort of all over the place. Um, I started college as an art major. I did some art history as well, and Spanish literature, and I was very much like visually oriented and loved to paint and draw, and sort of just assumed that I sort of envisioned myself as maybe like a gallery owner or a curator or something like that. Art was something that came easily to me, and it was something that like people always said I was good at. So I just was sort of like, okay, I guess that's like what you do with your career is you just like you do what you're good at. And I wouldn't say I really played an active role in like pursuing that trajectory. And then I had to take an anatomy and physiology class for a figure drawing class that it was required as part of the art major.
Oh,
um,
wow.
and genius, because not only did it like totally help me with visually rendering the human body, but I was like totally fascinated with, oh my god, like what's going on underneath the skin. And if you understand this visually, like it makes sense, but it also like so many more questions come up. And how does movement happen? And so that led to a switch or a pivot really in my career where I was like, okay, this is way more challenging but way more exciting, so I'm going to do science. And specifically I sort of ventured into exercise physiology, which is like exercise science. It's a very broad career discipline. It includes everything from like working in as an athletic trainer to working with professional athletes to working in the hospital. So my bachelor's degree is in exercise physiology, and I continued on to graduate school to do a master's in clinical physiology or clinical exercise physiology, um, which is which is a very like obviously it's a clinic intense version of that job. And for me, that meant that I was working in the cardiac care unit. I was working in cardiac rehab, working with people that had been or were recovering from cardiac injury, so a heart attack or heart surgery, open heart surgery, or were battling chronic cardiac related diseases, COPD included, so people that had respiratory disease. So I was doing a lot of that, prescribing exercise as a form of medicine. There's a lot of like sort of taboo topic out there. There's definitely a divide in the community amongst people that feel, or between people that feel that exercise is not medicine and people that feel that exercise is medicine. Um, I am totally biased. I feel exercise is a form of medicine. I don't think it replaces modern medicine, but I do think it's got a very acute, very pronounced molecular effect on the body. And why wouldn't you use that to help heal yourself or prevent disease if it's available to you? So that's how I feel about it. So that was the next phase, and then I really wanted to. I wasn't sure what to do after that. I liked being in the clinical environment, but it wasn't like I was definitely starting to feel like it was a little mundane. I was sort of the same thing every day, and it was difficult working with patients that I often felt that they didn't really care. They weren't really interested in making lifestyle changes. And I think over time that can sort of weigh on you, because you invest a lot in your patients, and you care for them, and you want them to heal and enjoy life. And a lot of times, at least in this particular patient population, it's very difficult to sort of get behavior change to occur. But it happens. But that was difficult for me, and I just felt like I wasn't being challenged intellectually, and I just sort of wanted something more. And so I just like randomly was looking at graduate school programs, and saw a PhD program for biokinesiology, which is a mouthful. But basically, it's the study of human movement, as it relates to biomechanics, and it's basically the study of human movement, both physiologically, molecularly, and physically. So the mechanics, the physiology, and sort of the spatial interactions. And so that program was in California, at the University of Southern California, big name school. I assumed I would never get in, and I did. And I'm the kid that did, like, I got the bare bottom average score on the GRE. I never tested well. I had good grades, great grades, good recommendations, but was an average, like, standardized test taker. So I assumed that would mean I would not be able to go to like a top tier. That did not turn out to be the case, and I got really lucky, I think. And I got into that program, and I started working in breast cancer research, exercise oncology, which is using the same concept of prescribing exercise, using exercise as a form of intervention to help treat and prevent disease. In this case, it was breast cancer. So we were using exercise to try to modify certain risk factors for diseases associated with breast cancer, like metabolic disease, or vice versa. And so that was really cool. I loved working with those patients, with those people. And I did love living in California, but the program was really, really intense. And it wasn't, the mentor it was not a good fit. It wasn't the right match. And that made it really difficult to sort of commit wholeheartedly. And so I basically got to the point where I was like, I know what it's going to take to finish, but I don't want to sacrifice what I know I'm going to have to sacrifice to do it. And so, I didn't fail out of the program. I just realized that this wasn't the right fit. And so I had to walk away from that program, and I left and moved back to Maine with my husband. And so that was a really tough, really dark period. I knew I had made the right decision, but at the same time, I also just, I don't know, I guess I was sort of like disappointed in myself that I had like walked away from, like, who walks away from that sort of an opportunity. And, is this something I'm going to regret for the rest of my life? And, what am I thinking? I also, there's a little bit of tension with the mentor, and, I think she didn't, not she, this wasn't her fault, but I think I was really afraid that I wasn't going to be able to get a letter of recommendation, or if I was, like, how I was going to be able to continue in the career path without, like, academia is it's a very small world. Very, like, the politics are very delicate. So I just, by sheer luck, was able to transfer into a new program at the University of Maine, which is where I'm at now. And that program, it wasn't a great start there either. I had a mentor that was really brutal. She was not much older than me, and was just like, I think what it came down to is that she didn't have the time or the energy or the desire to mentor. Like, she did not want to put the time in. And I think I know I was the first PhD student she had. And she just, like, I think didn't realize until I was there that she didn't have she wasn't ready to mentor. And that's like a really important lesson I think that I've learned is in terms of like looking for mentors and seeking out mentors is just because you like the way someone appears on paper, just because, they represent all of these things and they seem like a nice person and they probably are a nice person. They're a nice person, doesn't mean that they're going to be a good mentor. But more importantly, like they have to want to mentor and they have to be willing to put in the time and energy to give back. And I think in academia and in medicine and in science, self-interest is a lot more common. That often outweighs the interest in helping others. Even though in this case, like having a PhD student also reflects well on the mentor because that's your avenue to get more publications, to continue your mentoring tree. So it has many benefits, but it also does require a lot of energy input. And I think most people don't realize that until they're in it. And then it's unfortunate because it's the student that suffers. It's not the person, the mentor. It's the student that has to be like, okay, well, you don't want me anymore. Now what? Now where do I go? And in my case, like she couldn't train me. So I was stuck in a program that, I had come from clinical sciences. I had never held a pipetter before. I hated chemistry in school. And here I am like, oh, I'm supposed to be a scientist now. Like nobody knows. And I like, don't know how to I don't know which one's a beaker. So, just like constantly like the imposter syndrome was like, it was real imposter syndrome. Yeah. Like obviously I'm capable of like simple things, but it was tough. I had to really like fight my way into that new program and eventually was able to pair up with the mentor that I have now, who's been amazing. Like totally. I mean, initially I think he was just sort of like, free labor, like whatever. But he was at a different point in his career. He had the time and the interest and the ability to, want to put the time into mentoring a student. And he did. And the result was, I'm a pretty fast learner and I really, when I'm invested in something, I do a good job or if I don't, I'll do it again until I do a good job. And, I think eventually that resulted in, I earned his trust and, developed a basic skill set. And that was enough of a platform to be able to say, okay, let's do this PhD thing. Let's, commit to that. And it all has worked out beautifully.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's great. Wow.
After a lot of hard, that's awesome. And I feel like really impressed, especially if you've been a perfectionist in the past, that you made that choice that was best for you, that early on choice where you were like, I'm going to leave this school and this program. I think that's so hard to do.
So hard. I won't lie. I still think about it all the time. It's like, it's very hard not to, because I haven't completely pivoted my career. Like I still very much overlap with a lot of the same people and scientific literature. And, there's a lot of memories that come up, just in the day to day. So I'd be lying if I didn't say that that's still, I still think about it. I probably will think about it for the rest of my life. I won't. Let's be honest. But I do stand behind the fact that it was the right decision.
And that's a brave thing to do. That's hard. Making any big change like that is really hard. So putting yourself first, even though like you still think about it and making that decision for that was best for you. Good for you. That's amazing.
Yeah. I feel like I definitely, now I have imposter syndrome too, sometimes when I think about it, because I don't know if it was like at the time I wasn't like, oh, I have to take care of myself. It was more of just like, I know I can't do this and I shouldn't do this, but I don't feel like I was so present in, I need to nurture myself. It wasn't, I don't want to say it was like a confident decision, because I agonized over it. And, and I questioned it. And, for a really long time, I thought it was the wrong decision. So it was not like a smooth cut by any means.
Yes.
Right.
I don't know. There maybe are people who can make decisions like that, but I am not one of them.
Oh, well, and I was there for 3 years. So, I had friends there.
Wow.
I had an apartment. I had, a research project that was funded, and, I had just gotten a, a fellowship for, and, and that has consequences on my CV, on my resume. So now, there are holes in it, and people will say, well, what happened here? And I say, oh, I had to walk away from all X amount of funding. Or I chose to. And people are like, red flag. When, you can't really give them the whole story. So my hope
Yeah.
is that people have experienced it. I don't hope people have experienced that. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. But my hope is that people are intuitive enough to sort of understand that probably what happened is that wasn't a good match, and, just be positive about it.
Yes, totally.
For sure.
And I don't think I'm alone here, because I know PhDs, but I'm always confused by what that entails. So like it sounds like, can you kind of describe what a PhD program is like for
Yeah.
you? Like you don't take
Well,
classes?
so the problem, I think, is that PhD is a doctorate in a discipline of information that's like this big.
Mhm.
So I'm going to have my PhD in biomedical science, but my actual doctor of philosophy is in like developmental biology of the heart. Like, how many other people like, it's very, like, not even pediatric cardiologists study at the level that we. So it's
Mhm.
very, very, even within the same program, like, there's so much variation that's why, no wonder the general public is confused, because, like, I couldn't tell you what my colleague down the hall, like, I sort of understand what they do, but I couldn't tell you about it in detail. So I
Mhm.
think every program is different, but generally speaking, a PhD program, at least in the US, because the European programs are very different. They don't require you to, generally speaking, the European programs don't require coursework. So you start your PhD and you just do the research. So people in Europe usually do their PhD in like 2 to 4 years, depending on exactly where they are in their program.
Okay.
In the US, the average is more like 5 to 7, and that's because most programs require at least 1 full year's worth of coursework, if not 1 to 2. Just, it really varies on whatever your specialty is and your discipline. Like, in biomedical research, you often have to take a lot of statistics courses and ethics courses in addition to the actual science. Um, and I imagine there's equivalents for all other fields as well. And also because in medical research, a lot of times, not in all cases, but if you're doing clinical research, which involves interaction with humans or research with humans, depending on the nature of that research, it has to get approved and written up and proposed, and following all those channels can take a year easily, to do research with humans. So that can add a year as well, just like waiting to get approval. And I don't want to say anything bad against that. Like, yes, people should
Mhm.
provide informed consent. Like, it's a very important part of the process, but I wouldn't say that it's time efficient.
Mhm.
Um, so definitely the people that do clinical research, their PhD tends to be longer, just because of the fact that they work with humans,
Mhm.
versus people that work with animals. Not that animals are treated any worse than humans, but it's a different. You can generate more data quickly with less tissue than you can with humans. There's just different guidelines. So most programs have, so the 1 to 2 year of coursework, and then you usually have, at a halfway point, you have like a qualifying exam where you sit in front of your committee and like propose your PhD research. Um, and they sort of decide, they put you through the ringer. They sort of like decide if you've got enough background knowledge, so they can ask you any questions about any science, like, theoretically. It's a terrifying process. I was pregnant when I did. Like,
Oh no. Oh no.
I thought I was gonna die, but No, so they put you through the ringer, and that's like your rite of passage. And then you either pass or fail that. If you fail that, you just normally you either like spend more time writing a new proposal and then try again, or you decide not to do your PhD and you just what's called mastering out, where people will take a master's degree instead and move on. Most people choose to finish. Most people pass, and most people have to do revisions at that point of their proposal for their research. And then depending on the nature of the research, that again, if you're working with humans, if you're working with animals, if you're working with cells, at least in the sciences, that will typically take another 2 to 3 to 4 years to actually to generate the data, to do the research based on the proposal and actually write your dissertation, which, for the average person is anywhere between like 300 and 700 pages. I mean, they're big, big experiments. So they take a long time to write. It takes a long time to collect the data. And so in the US, that's a typical timeline, at least in the sort of biomedical science world.
So what you're saying is getting a PhD is super clear and like black and white. You know your path from like day one.
No, a PhD is like life.
Yeah,
You
it
sort of have
sounds
an
like
idea
it.
of where you're going, and you sort of need the credential to do what you think you want to do, and you think you have what it takes. But like, there's going to be a whole lot of like growing up, and then there's puberty. That's like the qualifying exam. I feel
Oh my
like high
gosh.
school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like now I understand why I don't understand what a PhD
Yes.
entails.
Right.
Most PhDs don't understand. Like, I think most people will look back and be like, "Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't." It's just like was what it was.
I got my
Well,
I got
PhD
it.
now.
Yeah.
It's very arbitrary. It's very bureaucratic. So I was just having this conversation with my parents. Like, I personally am in a position where like I have a committee that they all have very different opinions about how the data should be presented, what more experiments I need to do, and they often will disagree, which is, that's by design. It should, we should have these healthy discussions about, amongst educated people, like peer review for our it's everybody should together decide how we're going to do this. But for me, that's been somewhat cyclical and somewhat drawn out. And often, so I'm in a place where I've been trying to finish for a while now. And right now it looks like I won't finish until this time next year. And that's
Oh,
like, hopefully, if everything goes according to plan. But things don't often go according to plan. So it's like, my parents are like, they're like, "Oh, you're still doing that?" Yeah. But like, I have to explain it to them every time. Like, I have a good thing going, like I have a good mentor. That's so hard to find. Like, I mean, yeah, it sucks. Like, it's so annoying to have to go through this over and over and over again. And, but the reality is that I don't really have control over it. Like, it's
mhm.
not in my control. What I can control is like generating what they need me to produce, and like my ability to be resilient and like keep going. So I think that's the PhD is like, I just did a post about this too. Like, being a good scientist, it's not about how smart you are. It's not about any of that. It's really your ability to like adapt and continue and endure.
Mhm.
Um,
Wow.
yeah.
You'd have to.
Yeah. What's the end goal then? Or is that like we don't know yet either? Like once you graduate with your
Well, it sort of depends on the economy.
okay.
I mean, I know it's like such a delicate topic, but I would love to be able to do some combination of research and teaching. Right
Mhm.
now, I teach first year medical students. I teach gross anatomy and histology, so like cadaver lab, and the cells under the microscope, and I love it. It's great. I love teaching first year med students. They're fun. Um, so ideally, I would be able to do something but I don't. I mean, academia, the economy, its funding it's is I don't know what you even want to call it, but it's variable and unpredictable. And so, my approach is, okay, well, I'm just going to try to be as qualified for all of the above as possible,
Mhm.
and you know what's available. I'll take, what's offered to me at the time that it's offered. So it may be that there's only teaching positions available, in which case I would take it. It may be that there's only research, in which case I would love that too. I do intend to do a postdoc, which is sort of like the science research version of a residency. So like in medical school, you have 4 years of medical school usually, and then you do like your residency where you are a doctor, you're a practicing doctor, but you're also like still learning. You're like a newly minted doctor. So that residency period is like where you're getting your like additional clinical education and like mentoring before you're like completely fully independent.
Okay.
And so a postdoc, and at least in the medical research world, is like very much a period after you finish your PhD where you join a lab and focus on like publishing a lot and being independent.
Yeah.
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 And I'm just seeing the time. Do you have time for a few more? I did not realize what time it was.
No,
Okay.
I'm fine.
Well, that's exciting though. It'll be fun to see in a year, hopefully, where you end up and what's to come. Yeah, we'll be crossing our fingers that it's a year. But
yeah.
I always curse every time I like dare say it out loud. But...
Right.
Yes.
Well, we won't talk about the timeline, but whenever you are done, we'll be excited to see what you end up doing.
Before we switch gears, I do think it's important because I feel like a lot of women and young women who aren't moms yet or want to be moms maybe feel like they can't do a career like this. Or, I mean, I hate to say it, but I personally do think it is still more difficult to be a woman in science.
It definitely is.
Not myself, but looking at the world. And so if you have any input on that or any advice for anyone.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest, I think my experience has been consistent with the fact that I think it's definitely harder for women in science still. And being a mother in science, or being a scientist that is also a mother, it's even more difficult. My experience in the science world, and it could be very different in the humanities, it could be very different like by field, but my experience in the science world is that there's sort of two communities of women in science in biomedical science, and there are like the women that have children and the women that don't. And the women that don't, generally speaking, are very like cutthroat and are not as understanding or supportive of the people that do choose to be a mother. And vice versa. So I think a lot of times, it can be difficult, especially if your mentor or someone that you trust and look up to is someone that has not chosen to have a family. That can definitely put a strain on your relationship, on the mentorship piece. And, I won't lie, I've had people that I've really trusted and looked up to that, when I told them I was pregnant, she said to me like, "Oh, so you've decided to join the dark side?" Like, yeah, no. And that was like a heartbreaking moment because I really, she was very much like empower women, women's rights. She was very immersed in the LGBTQI plus community and, very much like very liberal and very open-minded. And yet with this one thing, it was like I had let her down. So that was like, it's very real. It's still very much a thing. And again, I mean, I mentioned earlier, like a lot of my best mentors have been the men. And I think, I don't know if that's because they're like afraid to broach the topic or if they just, maybe it's been their experience with their own spouse or loved one that, that they've watched experience, there's a big barrier to cross. And, I think at least where I am, I'm one of very few female instructors, and it's hard. Like, I've experienced discrimination probably on a regular basis. And, when you walk in and they say, "Oh, there's mom," you're just like, oh, my name is not that.
They said there's mom.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, and they all have
I don't
kids.
even have
Like,
words for
oh,
that.
their dad.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
still evolving, but I think that, I mean, I feel comforted by the fact that my experience with most of the men has been that they've been very supportive, even if they haven't, like, even if inside their head they're thinking otherwise.
Right.
um, so advice, if you want to be a mom and you want to be a scientist, you just have to do it. You just have to do it knowing that there are going to be people that disapprove, whether that's vocally or passive aggressively. Unfortunately, I wish I could say that wasn't the case, but I think it's usually the case. So you can approach it from the perspective of realism and be proactive and act accordingly. So, make sure that you've got a good support network. You've got a team of people, even if they're not necessarily in your workplace, but that can support you through, the ins and outs of even just the postpartum period, where for me, I felt like I had to like reprove myself all over again as a scientist. And it wasn't necessarily anything that anyone said, but it was definitely just like a fear that I had. Like, people are definitely looking at me like I just had a baby, and why are they looking at me like that? Doesn't, so maybe a lot of it was in my head, but that was very much a real part of my experience. So that would be my advice, is to just approach it realistically and proactively. If that's what you want, you do you, and you make it happen, and you will make it happen. But knowing that there's probably going to be resistance, and the more you can sort of just prepare yourself for that and have your not backup plan, I don't want to say that, but like backup plan in the sense that you've got other people to connect with for support.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Right.
Thank you. Yes.
Does that make sense? Is that helpful? I don't
No,
know.
that
Oh,
is.
yes.
I think, right, like you said, if it exists and people don't know that going in, then knowing that and just knowing that you just kind of have to move past it and do you, like you
Mhm.
said, that's important. Yeah.
And insecurity in your job and job performance after you have a kid is real, or it was for me.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
It was
Yes.
so, I felt that way. Like, okay, I can't let my mom's side interfere with this professional side. And I work in peds, which is helpful, but it still felt like, oh, it's hard. It's a weird balance. It's hard.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Oh, switching gears. So what is it that you do, or do you do anything to sort of take care of yourself, to fulfill yourself or make yourself feel rejuvenated? Is there anything that you have as a go-to?
Um, yes, definitely. I have multiple things. I love to exercise. I don't love to like torture myself, but being active on a regular basis is something that helps me enormously manage my stress.
Mhm.
um, mostly like I've just sort of learned that by experience. Like, there have been periods where I haven't been able to be as active, and without a doubt, like within a few days or a week, it's like my moods just go down, the stress goes up, and not everyone is like that. Not everyone likes to move their body, and that's fine. But for me and my body, that's really important. And if I don't have that, just like brushing my teeth, you got to have that like in your day. If I don't have some movement, then something's not, and then the day is not complete, and something's gonna fall. But other than that, I think I, I hesitate to say this because I think it's sort of a double-edged sword, but I really, a lot of my identity as a scientist and what I do for work is also like what I really love. Science is a tricky sort of mistress, if you will, in the sense that it's so exciting, and it's such an intense experience. But it can also like let you down in very many ways, whether that's the politics of it or the actual science. So you know I hesitate to say that because I don't, it's definitely, if you have that sort of a relationship with your work, it's a slippery slope, because that also means that if if your self-care and your job and your well-being are like codependent upon each other, that's like can be dangerous. Because if one thing slips, that's so you got to have something else.
Mhm.
I also learned how to sew recently, and I'm like
Oh,
really into
wow.
that.
Oh.
Yeah, I like so random, like embroidery. I'm making like a quilt. I'm so domestic.
My
Oh,
gosh, I was gonna say, what's your project? A quilt.
Yeah, it's like this big.
You'll get there.
You're doing it though. Quilts are
I
hard to
just find
make.
it to be so soothing. You know, it's using this method called English paper piecing. So you basically like you glue the fabric to a piece of paper and then sew the piece of paper together. And I've just found it to be like so incredibly therapeutic. Just like the needle goes where you tell it to, and it's very like consistent, and I find it very
Wow.
soothing. Yeah,
Wow, I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah. Totally random
Right.
hobby.
That's a good one.
it is.
Yeah.
What's your favorite thing to do for exercise? Or maybe you don't have one.
A friend of mine not just, but opened a spin studio in Portland a couple years ago, and so that's my jam. I'm like totally into that. It's rhythm riding, so it's like Soul Cycle. It's like the Peloton that everyone's into, that style, but it's like very intense but fun and like based around like rhythm and dancing, and the music's great, and it's like I love that. But I also force myself to do some strength training, not because of how I look or how I want to look, but because women have muscles and it's very important to use them, if for no other reason than to prevent bone disease. Period. Like,
I like that plug.
just that. So I do that. I just sort of, it's like, I don't enjoy it. I won't lie.
Mhm.
But I do it because I know it's important. And, when I'm old, I want to be able to get out of a chair. I want to be able to like sit down and play with my grandkids. And part of that is putting in the time now to have,
Mhm.
functional baseline strength, for when that aging process begins. It's already
That's
started, but
the motivation I need, really.
Yeah.
So,
whatever it takes, like
Yep.
yeah.
it really depends on everybody's motivation. Like I'm intrinsically motivated by like human experiences. So like I want to be that grandmother that's like
Mhm.
able to walk around and doesn't,
Yep.
need a walker at 70. Nothing against people that do, but I just, there is a certain amount of that is in one's control, and
Right.
I feel like if I can, then I should for my
Mhm.
health and that of my family.
Mm. That's
That's a good
great.
way to look at it.
And do you have a parenting tip that you've either been given or just a favorite that you have that you would want to share with people?
Um, I remember that my baby shower when James was born, somebody gave me a book and they wrote inside, just remind yourself that like when everything gets crazy, that all will be well. And for whatever reason, that like stuck in my head, like all will be well, all will be well. And that is like there are so many times, especially in like the early motherhood period, where like there you just I don't want to say you reach rock bottom, but you reach a period where you're just like, I can't sustain this. Like I can't do one more breastfeeding session. I can't do anymore. And then like as soon as it gets to that point, like if you just stick it out like a second longer, it gets a little better. And there were just so many points where I was like, oh my God, like I literally just this sleep regression, like I can't do this. I can't do one more day. And then like that point was like, then it changed. And
Mhm.
so I think that I don't know if that's necessarily a piece of advice, but remind yourself that all will be well. Like that, especially in parenting and infants, like nothing is permanent,
Mhm.
for better or for worse.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's true. It's true. I always say that like kind of similar.
Yeah.
Like this is a stage, this is a phase, like phases end.
Like the
Yeah.
stage right now where my kid never sleeps, and I'm like, my eyes are just like the bags under my eyes. Sometimes I wake up and I feel like my eyes are gonna fall out of my head because
Oh,
they're so tired.
Well, I can't see them. You look
no, I
great.
was gonna say you look great.
So you're hiding it well.
Must have a great eye cream. Yeah.
That's miserable. Yes.
It's not even about look, it's about, like, the feel, like when you're so
Oh,
tired and like the skin just feels like it's like melting off your face.
Mhm.
oh yes, I
It's
do know that
painful.
feeling.
It's
Mhm.
literally painful to function throughout your day when you are that exhausted.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I
hope it
hope
gets
it
better.
passes.
No, I mean, it's like 2 is no everyone said, "Oh, the terrible 2s," and I'm thinking like, "Oh, these aren't so bad." And then like he turned 3 and like literally I was like, "Oh my God."
Yeah, 3 is where it turns. Yeah. Sorry. It's just true.
We can do it. We can get through it together, but definitely
Yeah.
definitely a tough one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh,
well, Lindsay, this has been so great, and I feel like I've learned so much questions that I've had for years about what is a PhD. So I'm glad you were able to fill that or answer that for us. But also your
Me too.
story, yeah, you're really positive and just you've done so much, and I'm really impressed by it. And I think yeah, your story is just really incredible. So I thank you for sharing that with us.
yes.
Well, I would encourage you to say the same thing to yourself. I think I definitely like don't want my platform or my appearance to give off the impression that like I've had it easy, but also that that I'm any better than anybody else. Like we're all just out there, making our way in this world and just trying to do our best and do the things that we love and like be with the ones we love. And so that's what I'm about. It may take me forever to finish my PhD, but
Yeah. And that's okay if it takes another 2 years. You said you love it and enjoy it, and I think that's so important too. It's kind of hard to find things that you love that you're able to do in life sometimes. So
oh yeah.
yeah,
And so many people are like actively searching for that and they're not able to find it.
yes,
And so I think that's like if you're able to find that thing that really does it for you, then
yeah.
like you should not give it up.
No, it's a gift, truly.
Yeah.
Good advice. And tell people where they can find you because your Instagram page is so fun to
Yeah,
follow.
it is.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that. My Instagram is at Laugh in the Lab. My initials are Laugh, LAF. And so that's my husband came up with the handle.
Oh,
He's so
nice.
savvy. Yeah, so I post all things motherhood, science, real life, mental health, mindfulness, the good, the
I know, I
bad.
love
Yeah,
it. It
it's.
is
Maybe.
just a mix, and
I
I'm
know.
like, "This is
I
awesome."
know. I love it, and it's all pink and pretty. It makes you feel calm.
Well, that's good. That's good. But it's not all sparkles.
It's
Let's be
not,
No.
no.
real.
It's pretty visually, but I mean, the topics that you're going into are so important, and I think that's what drew me in to you is like, I mean, this is important stuff, and I feel like I'm also like you post the academic side too. So I feel like you're teaching and also giving a real look into what it's like, which is really important. So,
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that that's what drew you in, and I'm glad that that's what you get from it because that's exactly what I hope to give off. So I think if I can be consistent in my expectations and my efforts with what people are actually getting, then that's like my job is done.
yeah,
Yeah.
call it a day. Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, we are sorry for keeping so much of your
Yeah.
like, keeping you so long. I'm so thankful for everything you shared. It's been so fun talking with you.
Oh, it was fun talking with you guys too.
Well, thank you, Lindsay.
I'll look
Yes.
forward to following your podcast.
Awesome. Thank
Thanks.
you.
All right. Have a good day.
You too.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. We hope you enjoyed our conversation. If you enjoyed the episode, we'd love it if you would head over and give us a rating and review. Remember to subscribe so you're always updated about the most recent episodes. And if you like what you heard, we would love if you would share it with a friend. You can find us at momandpodcast.com, at Mom and Podcast on Instagram, and our Mom and Podcast Facebook group. Thanks again for listening. Bye.